Hello retro fans! Today I've got the new FPGASid in its final version, and this is how it's going to look like when you're going to order the FPGASid and finally get the production version of this little device. If you have seen one of my previous videos, or some of my previous videos, I was using the FPGASid for quite a while, and this is a prototype, so this was not widely available. It just has been shipped to testers and all people like this. And if we just compare those two against each other, we can see that there is at least a small change in design. So we got a very significant notch on this side here. And the reason for this is that the FPGASid can be used for the C64 as well as the C128, but in a certain C128 model there is a part blocking the installation of the FPGASid, and therefore this notch is required. And it has a very significant kind of design, and the interesting thing is that this design can be found on the web page of the FPGASid as well, and I really like that they kind of picked up this design, whatever we want to call this, and yeah, basically that's the main reason for having this special PCB form, so to say. And otherwise there are some small changes on the PCB on the upper side as well as on the bottom side, but that's not going to be the topic for this video today. And just putting this aside, basically I'm going to install this onto my 469 board, which I have already prepared here to keep things a little bit compact. And basically this board runs originally an 8580 SID, which is something like this, but the FPGASid can represent a 6581 SID as well, so you can use this on newer boards as well as on older boards, and therefore you're quite flexible in terms of your replacement for a SID. And the interesting thing is that if you just want to replace a broken one, they become more and more expensive on platforms like eBay and something like this. And there are other replacements as well, like the SwinSID Nano, which is a very small rebuild like this, or the ARM-SID, which has been released quite recently, or the SwinSID Ultimate, which is a more advanced version compared to the SwinSID Nano. And I'm going to kind of present all of the different SID replacements in further videos. But today we like to talk about the FPGASid and how to get this one onto your board. And basically we have nothing else to do than removing the original SID from its socket. Hopefully it is on the socket. If not, then unfortunately you have to do some welding, some soldering. You have to get out the old SID, have to install a socket like this, and then you are able to install the FPGASid. And there's a small marking here in this corner saying pin 1. Perhaps this is a little bit hard to read, and this is your direction how to install the FPGASid on the board. Pin 1 is going to be here. That's just left to the little notch we can see here, and we really have to pay attention that we are not going to mix up the direction of the FPGASid. And I already had to bend those little capacitors here, because I was using a SID-FX adapter on this board already. And the FPGASid has a very low profile, and the reason for this is that due to the fact that we got some additional connectors on the top, we may have some issues in some 64s because the space between the board and the keyboard is very, very small. and therefore the FPGASID needs to be as flat on the board as possible. If you got some more space in your C64 case, then you can use an additional socket like this, which you put kind of in between, and then you raise the FPGASID a little bit, and then you may not have to bend those capacitors, but basically they don't mind. They feel still fine in this position as well, and therefore there's no problem. So let's put this one into the socket. Pay attention that you really hit the right position of the pins, and then press it gently on to the board until it stops moving. And now it's tight and fine. And basically, if you just want to replace a broken SID and you are still happy with one SID, then you're done. Then that's everything you need to do. But the FPGASID offers the opportunity to simulate, which is probably the wrong term, but to act as two SID devices in one C64. And in order to use this additional, let's say, opportunity, we have to provide a few more signals to the SID, because basically the C64 in its original form is not able to handle two SIDs just out of the factory. But fortunately we got all the signals required to address a second SID, and therefore there's a small set of cable delivered with the FPGASID. And the first one is this cable, which comes with 3 different clamps, and this cable needs to be connected to the FPGASID, and this plug just fits in one direction, so you can't do anything wrong with it. And those cables are connected to certain points on the C64. And fortunately there is a very interesting documentation on the FPGASID webpage. I am going to show you this in a second. And here we can see what we have to do with those cables. So, and the first thing is we're talking about the yellow and the black cable, and this needs to be connected to the address line A5 and A8, and you can find this quite easily on your main CPU on this 8500 R4, and here it is a pin 12 and pin 15, and you have to count from pin 1 down to the position you need to connect this to. And the second pin, or the third cable, or the second option, whatever, is going to be IO1, and this can be found on the expansion port, and therefore we're going to connect this to the pin 7 of this connector. So let me switch back to the video that we can see what I'm doing on the board. So, and this is exactly what I have done here. So I connected those two on my CPU on this side, and the red one on IO1 pin 7 on the expansion port. Now we are able to send additional information to the FPGASID, and then this device is able to act as two SIDs on one C64. Then you may raise the question how to get to this additional audio signal. Basically, there would be a possibility to simply mix the signal into a mono signal and access the mono signal, but that's not exactly what we were looking for, because if you really have a stereo SID, then we want to have a left and a right channel, basically. And in order to do so, the FPGASID is shipped with an additional small cable that looks like this, and this is going to be attached to the FPGASID as well. And with this cable we have the chance to clamp this to this video or audio jack on the board here, and I'm going to show you what's the purpose of this and how this is going to work. And in order to do so, I just have to switch to this page, and then here we go. So most of the C64 boards I have seen so far are using this so-called 8-pin DIN jack, and this is a combined jack that provides video signal as well as audio signal. And as we can see in this list, the pin 7 is not connected, and pin 7 is this one here in the corner, and we're looking from the other side, and therefore if we switch back to our camera view, we can see that pin 7 from the outside is going to be on this side from the inside, and we're going to use this unused pin to route the second SID audio signal out of our C64. And if you're going to order an FPGASid, and if you're looking for a solution with without a lot of soldering, all that stuff, then I recommend that you order the breakout cable. I think it's going to be named like this. And the breakout cable is nothing else than a kind of a splitter that separates the video signal from the audio signal. And I was doing exactly the very same thing like this breakout cable is doing. I was installing myself a 3.5mm audio stereo jack, and I was using pin 7 as well as pin 3, which is on this side, and pin 2, which is ground, and I soldered those 3 pins, 7, 3 and 2, to my external 3.5 stereo jack. So, and I have connected my mixer to this, and now we got the audio signal out of the C64. And basically that's all we have to do to have an FPGASid installed, provide the required information and get the stereo signal out of the C64. And in order to have a small or short presentation, I will going to show you this, and if we're going to switch on the C64, we can see that the FPGA starts to blink, and this is a signal that it is actually working. And then we can move over to our basic screen. I'm just going to mount the disk image, and then we can load our directory. And unfortunately I do not have Jiffy DOS installed on the C64 board, so this will take a second to load the program. And the reason for this config guru program is that we have the chance to configure the FPGASid. So out of the box it has some kind of factory preset, but in order to, let's say, tune to our own preference, we have a configuration program which is able to flash the firmware of the FPGASid as well. So we will see some updates of the FPGASid in the near future, I guess, depending on whether there's a need for this or not. And therefore you don't have to be afraid buying something that might not work 100% perfectly and not getting the chance to update the device. So this is one purpose for this program, and another purpose is simply to configure the FPGASid, and this is what we're going to see here. And we have basically 3 operation modes, which is one is mono, one is pseudo stereo, and one is full stereo. And I'm not going through every option of this config guru right now. This is something we're going to have covered within further video. But here we got a chance to switch between different SID types. So we can go for the older SIDs, or we can go for the newer SIDs. And we have some additional options in the expert screen. And we have even a diagnostic this is perhaps a little bit loud. So, and if you listen to this video in stereo or with headphones, then you may hear this kind of annoying beep on either the left or the right side. And here we can see that the addressing is all green, so we got all 4 addresses, and this is a check whether we have set up our cables correctly. And basically everything is working fine so far. And the last thing, which I haven't shown yet, is if we're going to switch over to the FPGA page. So that's the page where you can find all the information about the FPGASID. You find some additional installation videos as well for different types of C64 and the C128 as well. And here's an FPGA installation manual. That's the one we have looked on already. And here we have a representation which looks almost the same like what we have on my desk right now. And the last thing I like to do is, that's the 128, is this little thing. And as we can see, the FPGASID can store 2 configuration sets in its flash memory. An external switch can be connected to the FPGASID to switch between both configuration sets. And that's a very interesting feature. The prototype of the FPGASID was not providing this opportunity. But if you are familiar, or if you have heard about the SID-FX, for example, it is a quite similar approach. By having a small switch somewhere on your C64, or using features like the Keyman 64 or this magic jumper 14 on the reloaded MK1, then you are able to switch between 2 different configurations. So you can say, just let me step out of this annoying beep, which is indeed a little bit disturbing. So here we go. So if you want to configure your FPGASID to represent an 6581 SID for older demos and older games, but if you want to switch to newer games as well, like Sam's Journey or all the newest releases we have seen in the last years, then you are required to change the configuration quite often. And to jump into this config guru program is may a little bit cumbersome, and therefore you can create 2 distinguished configuration like you wanted to do, and then you can store them onto the FPGASID, and with a flick of a button you can switch between those 2. And I have built myself a small button like this, which I'm going to present to you as well. And that's basically just a normal female connector on this side and a small switch on this side. And if we're going to have a look at the manual, we're going to see that we have to connect this between pin 6 and pin 10. So let's see whether we can have a small zoom here as well, so that we are not going to mix up anything. So, and it looks like we have to do it this way. One is going to be here, and one is going to be here, probably. Better check twice. So hopefully we haven't killed it now. Let's see. We're going to switch over to the C64 board. We now see a change. Basically not, because we haven't configured 2 different configuration. But now we can see active config is B and active config is A. So, and that's a very comfortable thing. If you have set up something like this, then we really can just press a button, have different configuration. And if you got kind of bored of it, then we press a button again and got the other configuration. So basically that's all I want to say today about the FPGASID and the installation and all the options we can use so far. And I'm going to release a couple of videos in the next time with a couple of sound samples and impressions of the FPGASID. But if you browse my YouTube channel, you will find a lot of examples of the FPGASID prototype, which is very close to the final version already. And there you can inform you about the quality and functionality of the FPGASID. And well, basically that's, as I mentioned, all I have to say for today. If you have any questions, if you have some special requests running the FPGASID, your preferred type of game or demo or whatever you want to do me with this one, feel free to use the comment section. And if you have any other question as well about compatibility, installation, whatever, then feel free to ask as well. And well, if you want to stay informed about further upgrades or further progression of the FPGASID and all that stuff, feel free to subscribe. It's absolutely for free. And you can follow me on Twitter as well. I will put the Twitter link into the video description too. So thank you very much for watching. See you for the next episode, and bye bye.